Good evening, Mr. Tharoor.
Hello, how are you, Siddhant? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you well. Yeah.
Excellent. You're pretty clear as well. Very good. So it's just the two of us, and we will go ahead and start.
Yeah, that sounds great. Firstly, thank you so much for joining the call today. You've obviously been a very inspiring figure over the past few years. I remember actually watching your speech at the Oxford Union about 5 years ago on reparations. I was like I really just enjoyed listening to you and hearing that. So yeah,
Thank
thank you
you.
for all that. Yeah. And yeah, so I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about sort of climate action and how this pandemic has influenced sort of climate action for the youth, and maybe some advice that maybe you have for us in the future. So I guess I could get started with the first question.
Sure. We have half an hour, so let's
Yeah,
use it fully and well. Go ahead.
absolutely. Obviously we've seen the environment improve over the past few months. Like we definitely in Delhi where I live, we saw cleaner skies for the first time in years. And do you think that this crisis, which imposed a lockdown, has led to sort of a trend towards a cleaner future, or do you think this is just a temporary adjustment that will soon be turned back into what the situation was earlier?
Well, look, you're absolutely right that the one silver lining amongst our collective clouds of this COVID experience has been the bright blue skies and cleaner air we've all been allowed to enjoy. I mean, I got locked down in Delhi. The national capital region was the poster child of India's chronic, year-long, nationwide air pollution problem.
Mhm.
And as we know, on average, most of the days in a year actually show up in the poor to severe category on the
Mhm.
National Air Quality Index.
Yeah.
And yet, because of the lockdown, construction, industrial, and vehicular activity, which cumulatively contribute about 75% of Delhi's PM 2.5 levels, came down to a crawl, and the capital, of course, experienced record levels of clean air. Now, does that mean that we suddenly are going to be more air quality conscious? Difficult to say, Siddhant, because after all, there's no question in my mind that Delhiites and the world generally has received immense gains from these whopping reductions in PM 2.5, PM 10, nitrogen oxide levels, all of these. But once normal, quote unquote, activities resume, are we really going to have the clean air continuing, or will the dense smog that has dominated our most polluted regions be once again the characteristic of our life? I mean, I'd like to think that we can actually fight this battle better. I'd like to think that all of us, because we've suddenly got used to better air, will want to protect our weaker respiratory systems, the very conditions that have made us more vulnerable to a virus like COVID-19, all of these things which have really been cramping us in all sorts of ways. You know, our children growing up in Delhi are actually at a disadvantage when it comes to respiratory health and lung function. Labor losses are happening because of air pollution. Premature deaths are costing the country. So there's no need to make an argument. You already are aware of all of this.
Mhm.
My real concern is, will we be able to come up with a credible clean air action plan to hold on to some of these gains once normal life, normal economic activity in particular, resumes? I'm sorry to say, as a politician, that air quality is simply not an electoral issue in India. Not
Mhm.
even public health has been an electoral issue. As you know,
Mhm.
in the US, healthcare is a major electoral topic. 41% of the voters said it's the most important topic. In
Mhm.
India, nobody says it. I mean, politicians who go to their constituencies looking for votes find that there are other issues on people's minds that people will vote on, not
Mhm.
public health, not air pollution, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, of course, jobs, poverty, education, growth, food security, these are the things that people care about. And for those, you need economic activity. So
Mm-hmm.
um, all I have to say is that I would like to wish that you're right. I'd like to think very much that the debate about air quality will get off the seminar circuit and into the lives of ordinary people and
Mm-hmm.
into the politics of our country. The COVID pandemic has shown us the importance of investing far more in effective public health, and also, I believe, has helped encourage a completely different mindset in the eyes of the voters and the public representatives.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when it comes to things like air. We need to, of course, ensure that when we come back to a normal economic activity, we will have to unite against chronic air pollution. We'll have, as a human community in India, we'll have to say we want healthy lifestyles. We want to question the conventional ways of how we work, how we move, how we consume. And it seems to me that we need to be able to say that if we're going to pull through this crisis and win the fight against corona, the next thing to do is to make sure that in order to make up for the time lost for the economy, we don't go gangbusters in the wrong direction.
Mm-hmm.
No one is saying should hold back economic activity. Everyone's saying let's do it the right way.
Yeah.
Let's find a way to drive the economy forward without, again, driving our air pollution levels through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
Renewable energy, for example, could be a major part of the answer. Government should give major financial incentives, tax breaks, and on the other hand, punitive incentives for the other kinds of coal plants and so on. Create, frankly, a case for toxic air that's not just high-minded, but also practical.
Absolutely.
You know, if we as a society can set aside our differences and wage successful campaigns against poverty or pestilence or patriarchy, why can't we do with toxic air as well?
Absolutely.
That's not a simple answer. It's certainly not an unmitigated positive answer, but I think it's the best answer I can give in terms of a realistic answer to our present predicament.
Yeah, I completely agree. I definitely believe that we sort of put air quality aside sometimes, and it's a very prevalent problem, especially in the national capital. So I guess a question that would be related to that is how can we put more pressure on the government or multilateral organizations or even corporates to sort of uh, participate more in climate action and sort of how can we, India, a developing economy, transform into a sustainable one that we're seeing many of the developed European countries do? Or do you think that it would be difficult for us to jump to the level a lot of European countries, for example, I guess France and Sweden come to mind, sort of the example they've set. Do you think we can achieve that?
Can we achieve what the Europeans have done?
Yeah,
Uh,
like in the near future, or do you think it's a longer journey first?
Well, it's definitely a longer journey because the level of awareness out there is simply not matched here. I mean, you know, frankly, our awareness of environmental issues, climate issues,
Mm-hmm.
clean air issues is a long way behind where things
Mm-hmm.
are in the developed world. Now, it's partially because, of course, the developed world is at a different level from where we are. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I'm the first to admit when I talk to international audiences but listen, all of you people from, you know, whether you're Australian or Austrian or you can take for granted something which 600 million Indians can't. That is, you can walk into a room, turn on a switch and expect to be flooded with light.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that many people in our country do not have indoor domestic electricity. So when the government talks in terms of environmental consciousness being part of our culture and our heritage and so on, absolutely true. But the fact is that we aren't at a place yet where we can forego some of the things that the Western world can forego because they
Mm-hmm.
actually have done stuff. So my own answer is we need legally binding climate targets. We
Mm-hmm.
need an actionable, for example, to your last question, the clean air plan. Where are the targets? Where are the realistic deliverables? Where are the measurable action points for us all to work together as a society to fulfill? They're not there. They're just pie in the sky targets. And I'm afraid we have to be as citizens conscious that governments can shoot arrows in the sky.
Yeah.
But if they're not going to be landing anywhere useful,
Yeah.
then we don't actually achieve any goals. Our environmental laws, according to all the lawyers who study these things, are really quite hopeless. And even where good laws exist, implementation is non-existent. For example, rainwater harvesting. In a country where we are really depleting our groundwater supply rapidly, how can we not have meaningful environmental legislation and then make sure it's actually done? Even government institutions like railway stations are not collecting rainwater for recycling, even if it's only for flushing out the waste in the toilets or on the train tracks. But the fact is, these are all things we will need to do. So, you're right that in many ways Europe is a remarkable role model. And I am not challenging the legitimacy of your question, but I don't think that we are there yet. I think a crisis like what we've gone through has helped us focus on environmental conservation and climate change to some degree, but it needs the government, because the government has a huge bully pulpit, as they say, and it needs other people in politics and in public life to take up these issues and push them and increase buy-in. So people aren't going to say, look, it's more important for me to have a smoke belching factory that gives me a job than it is for me to have clean air. Or it's more important for our economy to grow by X% than for us to observe renewable energy protocols. I mean, there has to be a certain change of mindset before we actually get there, Siddhant.
So how do you think we can develop that mindset? Do you think that's going to come primarily through education, or maybe sort of government initiatives, or do you think that those aren't binding enough for there to be?
I believe in both. In other words, I believe certainly that you need the government to set you targets. You need the government to help enforce those targets by actually having laws or policies or incentives or disincentives so people have a reason to get there. And you need the government to also make people aware of why it's in their interest to fulfill these targets. But equally, you need bottoms up. You need civil society, NGOs, school children, college students, etc., becoming aware, becoming conscious, spreading the word. One issue, for example, is a major cause of pollution and climate change everywhere is vehicles and vehicular pollution. More trucks and buses than cars, but the whole lot. Motorcycles, all of them. Now, you can exhort people to say reduce vehicle use, but unless you produce and invest in, as a government, clean, cheap, easily accessible mass public transport using renewable energy, electrified trains and metros, etc., how on earth will people reduce their vehicle use? If you gave me a way of getting to work without taking out my car, that doesn't cost me much more, maybe a little more, but saves me a lot of hassle, I will leave my car at home. I'll happily get on this metro or bus or whatever. But then you have to make sure that it's available, that it's ubiquitous, that there aren't people jostling and shoving each other with their elbows to get on that vehicle, that the routes are so widespread that they're convenient, and at the same time that they are following principles of renewable energy. I mean, if they're belching forth smoke as many buses in our cities do, I'm not sure that's a vast improvement. So people will only trade off convenience for environmental sustainability if you do all the things I mentioned. So first you say, we're going to reduce vehicle use. Singapore, for example, put a massive tax on cars. The same car in America will cost 170% less because in Singapore there's a punitive tax on buying that car. So that's one thing we do. But people in Singapore are prosperous, they'll spend that money. You then build a metro. You make sure that metro runs overground as well as underground. You make sure it runs on clean air, on clean electricity, and not on diesel engines, etc., etc. You have the routes going everywhere across this tiny island state. People use it. This kind of approach is going to be important. And you mentioned Europe and the Netherlands, for example. There are cities that are designed to emphasize the use of bicycles and public transport. Cycle paths are set apart from main roads. There's a nationwide public transport ticket scheme. I've seen photographs of the Queen of the Netherlands cycling to the palace or from the palace to a meeting. That's the kind of, so obviously public awareness, public acceptability, everything is there. Okay, or you take Paris. If you were looking for sort of models for Indian practice and, from Europe, Paris, there are car-free days, okay? Public transport is free on those days. There have been hundreds of miles of bicycle lanes built in Paris. And so the result is people are simply not allowed to use their cars. Now, I suppose if there's a desperate emergency, you're going to rush a pregnant lady to a hospital, I'm sure the police will make exceptions, but the exception can't become the norm, as it often happens in our country. So you have a rule, everyone observes it. At the same time, public transport is free. Bicycle lanes are built. You can rent a bicycle on any street corner, off you go. Right. Those are the kinds of European examples I would point to. And there are certainly examples from other parts of the world. We don't only have to look at Europe.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I completely agree that there's a serious mindset change required. And I think given that a very large percent of our population is of a very young age, how do you think maybe we can sort of amplify the voice of the youth so that they can be better heard in climate matters and sort of have maybe a seat on the table in a sense? Do you think that's possible?
Yeah, I mean, I'd have a sort of 4-point message, Siddhant, if I may, for the young people of today, including yourself. I recognize it's easy to lose hope in the immediate term due to the pandemic. So the first point is keep the faith. Science is working very hard. I mean, it's not only the attitude you see around you in India is not the only attitude. Scientists are working nonstop to end environmental change, climate change, air pollution, the whole works, and have faith this will pass. Second, I realize that sometimes the older generation, which includes people like me, but not me personally, may sometimes be frustrating in their refusal to take climate change seriously. And I think one of the things I would urge young people to do is to stand up and defend the science when it's under attack. The way in which someone like a schoolgirl like Greta Thunberg, for example, the very outspoken young Swedish schoolgirl, has led the charge. My own exhortation to other young people is be your own Greta Thunberg in your environment, in your college or school, in your homes, in your communities. Number 3, remember that we all bear a responsibility for fighting climate change, however young we are. You may be only a student, you may only be in high school or in college, but you can certainly ensure that people around you are being as climate friendly as possible. Certainly setting an example at home in reducing consumption of electricity, turning off lights, turning off appliances you aren't using, all of that stuff is a simple enough thing to do. Walking instead of taking the family vehicle, if you can help it, would be a good thing to do. And the fourth and final message would be to be aware of politics, because frankly, I would say that politics is always going to affect these issues like pandemic or climate change. You have to show some, I mean, the biggest, shall we say, easy win for a lazy or irresponsible or corrupt politician is when voters give him a free pass. Whereas if voters hold him to account, if voters say, we care about this issue, what are you doing about it, and force him to think about it. Think of what a difference it'll make. And young people in particular, I find, have the energy and the faith and the optimism to go out and do that. Say, climate change matters to us. Go and volunteer for NGOs or civil society movements that are doing this. Many of you kids have come out of schools in which the anti-tobacco campaign made a huge difference in your lives and your family's lives. I've heard from so many parents whose 10-year-olds, 8-year-olds would come home from school having heard about the evils of tobacco and have thrown away their parents' cigarette packets saying, we don't want our daddy to die of lung cancer, or mommy to die of lung cancer. Now that kind of thing is, to my mind, an indication of how young people can actually bring about mindset change, can actually bring about social change. So you guys should do that. You should hold your families to account, your political leaders to account. If I have to look objectively, Siddhant, at the time ahead of us, in this crucial period where, as you know, we have the Sustainable Development Goals for 2030,
Mm-hmm.
how are we going to achieve any climate change goals in the world?
Mm-hmm.
One very good thing about your previous question is this thing of, can we learn from other countries?
Mm-hmm.
And I would agree with you. I think we shouldn't be parochial.
Mm-hmm.
We should see how other countries have actually been able to lick this, and without any embarrassment, copy them. Okay. So Finland first adopted a carbon tax in 1990. Why shouldn't we have carbon taxes in India?
Absolutely.
Right. Then the point I already made to you when you asked another question about legally binding climate targets.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to have a serious climate act with teeth.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Targets into a national law, have punishments, have legal incentives. And we really have to confront vested interests, because honestly, polluting industries are usually very politically connected, very economically powerful.
Yeah.
But if we don't regulate their harmful effects through laws, I don't really see how we're going to get out of the bind we're in. I mean, the saga of the Ganga. Okay, here's the most powerful prime minister we've had in living memory. He makes the Ganga a signature issue. Has he successfully cleaned the Ganga in 6 years? It's actually more polluted today than it was when he was in power 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So what's wrong with our implementation? Why aren't we able to get these things right?
Yeah.
To my mind, these are all the sorts of things. And you young people in 2030 are all going to be adults in your prime.
Mm-hmm.
You need to work in the right direction now.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
Sorry, Siddhant. Yeah, just a small frog in the throat, as they say. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I completely agree. I do think sort of the stage is set for us to take action now as the youth. I think there's a long way to go for us as a country and as the as the world. I think there's definitely a lot of sort of collaboration required as well. As you'd mentioned, we can learn from other countries, that we can partner with them as well. So yeah, I think that we have like a great sort of journey ahead of us. And do you have any final feedback or advice for the youth, maybe to take post this pandemic and sort of in their journey?
Well, I gave you my thoughts for the youth about the importance of having faith, defending science, sharing responsibility, agitating in your community and with political leaders and so on. But let me add perhaps one more for young people, which is that, the famous line of sort of "Mujh mein kya kami hai?" What is it that we're lacking that others are doing so much better? And don't only look at Europe, as your earlier question made me do. Let's look at what developing countries like us are doing better than we are. It's startling. For example, I think we get something like 3% of our total energy needs from solar energy. And we have sunshine most of the year in most of the country, right? So what's the matter with us? Take a country like Morocco. They've invested so much in solar power that this year, 42% of their energy needs will be from renewable sources.
Wow.
What about all the sunshine we've got?
Mm-hmm.
Why can't we do that? I mean, we've come up with huge targets, but we are not even close to meeting any of them, including the targets in Paris, because none of them are being taken seriously even by the government, and there are really no incentives, tax-wise or financially.
Mm-hmm.
Bhutan has been able to mandate such strict laws on trees. Just plant. You cannot chop a tree without planting more trees than you chop. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
They are actually carbon negative. That is, Bhutan's forest cover absorbs more carbon than the entire country produces. And we've actually helped Bhutan. We've invested in their hydropower.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of Bhutan's energy is actually fueled by water, right? They're not burning either coal or wood. They're using the abundant supplies of water in their mountains. We're helping them do that. And they're giving free electricity to rural farmers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if Bhutan next door to us can do this, come on.
Yeah.
We in the name of development are chopping down trees every day. We don't build a highway without chopping down thousands of trees.
Yeah.
How many do we really plant? Can't we invest in tree retransplantation technology? Get these in Western countries have them. Big machines with claws, bulldozers with claws that lift the trees up by the roots and plonk them somewhere else so that you actually have all the benefits of mature tree. You can't really shut down, I beg your pardon, chop down 1,000 trees and plant 100 saplings and think you've done a good job.
Yeah.
Those saplings will take ages before they're actually soaking up enough carbon, right?
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me these are the sorts of things we're simply not doing enough. I mean, the ideal, the model, if you really want a model, it'll be Costa Rica, which generates 98% of all its electricity from renewables.
Wow.
Their city buses, their taxi fleets, are all electric. Okay, we're not going to get there, but the fact is that there's a lot that we ought to do and that we ought to do better than we are doing, to be very honest. You are a remarkable example, Siddhant, of getting young people involved in issues of sustainability. I do feel very seriously that sustaining the planet and its people requires more young people to be given a seat at the table by policymakers. It doesn't happen. For example, I suggested that we should actually have some seats in Parliament reserved for people from 18 to 30. Right now, you have to be 21 to contest, and frankly, it's very rare to find an elected MP below the age of 30. It will usually be a handful of cases that exist since we became independent. You'll find that of the handful of cases, everyone is actually the son or daughter of a deceased political leader. And that isn't good enough. We need to get the young people out there. You folks don't carry the baggage of what hasn't worked.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have the complacency that many people from the older generations tend to have.
Mm-hmm.
And I must say, you being the next generation to take over will also have a better sense of the importance of preserving the earth for your and the next generation.
Yeah.
Catch them young, they always say. And there's no other better example of catching them young than in activism on climate change. So I do want to say thank you to you, Siddhant, as we wrap up this conversation, not everyone thinks enough about the larger issues in their lives and the lives of their communities. I'm glad you've done so. But if you want sustainability to get a greater boost, you really have to do a lot about enhancing awareness. The Prime Minister talks about Atmanirbharta, self-reliance. But self-reliance is not enough. It's also in what way are you self-reliant?
Yeah.
How will you protect your ability to actually ensure that the environment within which you're living and working is healthy, safe, and will remain so even as you succeed and grow and prosper. I would hate it if self-reliance became an excuse or a justification for destroying the environment within which we're living and working. So let's take it seriously. We're in a climate emergency. Young people can help solve it. Of course, the government has a lot to do. But as I said earlier, top-down policies and laws and bottoms-up activism, both are required to solve this problem. Thanks, Siddhant. Good luck.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All the
Mr.
best.
Yeah. All right.